There's always been something about the Stanley Parable that I never fully understood, that being the narrator himself. Now, before I dive too far into this, I wanted to warn you guys that this video may contain some spoilers. Therefore, if you wish to play the Stanley Parable for yourself, please do so now, before watching the rest of this video. Anyway, where was I? Ah yes, the narrator. He is a rather strange being in this game. Sometimes he remembers when the resets happen, other times he doesn't. Sometimes he's aware that you're a real person, on other occasions he thinks you are Stanley. Inconsistency seems to be the theme here with the narrator, but oddly, he's not the only voice that the player can hear in this game, although that voice can only show her face during a specific ending. Just like how the narrator is only aware of certain things during other endings. It makes you think why that is the case. Speaking of endings, why are they the only times the narrator becomes aware of what's happening in them? For example, the confusion ending. This ending is seemingly the only one that causes the narrator to recall the previous resets. Of course, there is another ending where he knows he'll be sent back. I forgot what the ending is called, but it's the one where you go off track a little bit and walk through a blue door. That is where you can allow the narrator to experience peace for a moment, before you unfortunately have to rip it away from him, as there's no way to progress beyond that point. Anyway, I've gotten a little bit off track here. The point that I'm trying to get across is that, why do certain actions change the narrator's behaviour? Why does the narrator never call out the player out on what they did before? And why does the narrator only want you to get one specific ending, that being the freedom ending? There is a lot of mysteries and unknowns in this game, and it never fully explains them to you, leaving you to try to fill out the gaps for yourself, with whatever information the game will give you. Before I forget, let's talk about the other voice now. This voice appears during the museum ending. This voice knows about the narrator somehow, which leads me to believe that maybe Stanley wasn't the first to hear him. There could have been others, all of whom followed his instructions and never fought for themselves. Could that be the reason why the narrator removed them in the end? Because he couldn't get them to do other things? Has this been a test the entire time? Sorry, I got a little distracted there, but it's hard not to think about these things. Anyway, the other voice. Who is she? Why does she only appear during the museum ending? Is she always existed before? Why didn't she attempt to help the player sooner? Why didn't she attempt to communicate with them? Was it because she was afraid of what the narrator would do to her? Whatever the case may be, it's just another mystery to add onto the list, as we don't even know who the narrator is as well, nor do we know why we can hear them in the first place. There is another ending that I wanted to talk about, as that brings even more mysteries to the table, and that is the real person ending. This ending in particular requires you to go to the right the entire time, ride on a platform, and then enter a room with a phone. What the narrator expects you to do is to pick up the phone, but you can actually unplug it at the back. When you do so, the narrator will be shocked and finally realize that you aren't Stanley. But why did it take this ending for him to see that? Why didn't any of the other endings give him this realization? Was it because the narrator thought you really didn't have a choice here? Anyway, after you unplug the phone, the narrator will show you a video and then take you back to the two doors. There, he wants you to follow his orders, but you can once again defy him here. When you do so, things will begin to glitch, fully locking you into the real person ending. When you complete this ending, you'll be seemingly kicked out of Stanley's body, watching from the outside of the room as the narrator tries to get Stanley to move. But Stanley never does. He just stands there forever. Now, someone else made a video about this ending in particular, going over their own theory as to why Stanley never makes a choice here. So I'll just quickly summarize it. Basically, Stanley never makes choices for himself in his entire life. Choices have always been made for him, and he's always been following someone else's orders. The same applies to when the player takes over him. He's just following their orders. So when you remove the player and strip him from those orders, Stanley doesn't know what to do. Even when the narrator tells him where to go, Stanley just can't do it, because for once in his life, he can actually make a choice on his own. And for someone who's been listening to others for as long as they've been alive, that must have been terrifying to him. hence the freeze response. It does make you wonder though, if Stanley was given enough time to think, would he have moved on his own? Would he have made his very first choice? Or would he have just followed the narrator? We won't ever know, as the game will reset after a certain point, allowing you and Stanley to become one once more. Honestly, this game can be very creepy sometimes, but this video isn't about the game itself, it's about the narrator. So, let's see what we know about the narrator. We know that he wants you to always choose the freedom ending, and when you don't, he can get very upset about it. Although, certain endings can bring him some entertainment, along with pain and sorrow. Sometimes you can't help but feel sorry for him. Other times, you feel no sympathy. After all, if the narrator tried harder to communicate with you, perhaps most of these things wouldn't have even happened. But he never does. Probably because he thinks that he's already gotten some control over Stanley. After all, he doesn't realize that there is someone controlling Stanley already, until the real person ending is triggered. In the end, the narrator, along with the museum voice, are two confusing entities, both of whom only leave more questions than answers. But I think I've rambled on long enough. What do you think the narrator is? Do you think they know what is going on, or not? Also, what's your opinion on the other voice? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Until then, I'll see you next time.